Welcome to Human Risk, a podcast dedicated to the understanding of human behaviour as a risk. Here's your host, Christian Hunt.
Hello and welcome back to the show. On this episode, I'm returning to a topic I've covered before and will undoubtedly be covering in the future, and that is AI. But don't worry, this is less about the tech and more about the humans, because AI poses all sorts of interesting questions when we think about how we interact with it. Areas like trust, transparency, and how we relate to the machines. AI isn't just about new tools and efficiencies and processes. It brings a whole load of uncertainty about work, judgment, expertise, and about what we can safely hand over to it and what we really shouldn't. And much of the conversation around AI still feels very binary. It's either a miracle solution that will fix everything or an existential threat that should be slowed, regulated, or stopped altogether. And what often gets lost in between these two positions is the human experience of actually working with it on a day-to-day basis. What does it feel like to collaborate with a system that you don't fully understand? How do we build confidence when outcomes are probabilistic rather than certain? What happens to trust in organisations, in leaders, and in ourselves when certainty is no longer available? My guest on this episode has spent years working at the intersection between technology, psychology, and human behaviour. Tina Weisser is a professor at the Munich University of Applied Sciences, where she researches human-AI collaboration, systems thinking, and how organisations cope when complexity and uncertainty become the norm rather than the exception. In our discussion, we talk about why trust isn't a technical problem, but a human one, why uncertainty isn't something we necessarily want to eliminate, why being right about technology too early doesn't always help, and we explore what it means to work alongside AI agents, how confidence and competence really develop, and what AI might be revealing about us rather than the other way round. I first came across Tina on LinkedIn, where she consistently posts fascinating questions and insights from her research, and I was really keen to get her on the show. So I think you're going to find what she has to say super interesting. It's my discussion with Professor Tina Weisser on trusting AI in an uncertain world. Tina, welcome to the Human Risk Podcast.
Thank you, Christian. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. And you're somebody that, as I was saying to you before we started recording, I have no idea how I found you, but I'm so pleased that I did, because you've got content that is always worth reading, and we'll come on and talk a little bit about your areas of research. But just before we do that, tell my listeners a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I am Tina Weisser. I live in Munich, and since 3 years, I have a professorship at the University of Applied Science in Munich. And in particular, I have the pleasure to be part of a very exciting new institute that's called MUCDI. That's Munich Center for Digital Science and Artificial Intelligence. And that was founded 5 years ago. And they kind of decided that it's time for more interdisciplinary work. So we have students that they don't study just one topic, one subject. They all have some technology. I mean, they all have like a computer science, I would say, leg, and then they have something else. They either have engineering, or in my case, it's more about design, like human technology interaction, or even geodata science. So that's very interesting, because we're like an innovation department within a university that has been there for quite some time. So lots of established courses, people. I have 500 colleagues, so that's quite a lot. But still, we're just there are two bigger universities in Munich. So this is just a small university with 500 professors. And that's what I started 3 years ago. So there I lead a program that's called Computer Science and Design. And before that, how do I get there? How did I got there? That's maybe an interesting question, because I think this happens from like in many, if you look at a career, after quite some time, you see like a red thread. But if you're in the middle of it, it feels like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of a tornado and I have no idea where I'm going, like no idea at all. I feel like I'm completely lost. So I kind of got into business after I studied actually architecture, because I thought that is complex enough. But by the time when I studied that, there was a big in Germany, it was called like a building crisis. So lots of architects had no jobs. So I thought, this is insane. You're not going to study something where you are unemployed afterwards. So there was like all this computer interaction coming up. So I was actually the person I made for everybody the Hotmail addresses. So that's quite some time ago. Nobody had email. This is like when email and internet started. So that's when I kind of was at university, and there I totally focused on everything that had to do with digital in any cases, in any like all different varieties. And that was my new topic. So I kind of jumped on that. And so that was quite exciting. And then we founded a company. So we had a startup. I was still studying, and I was already an entrepreneur trying to learn my lessons in real life. So I felt there was like the real life, and then there was this university life where everything was just just, I mean, wouldn't say romantic, but very easygoing. And then we had the real business life. But thankfully, we had a business angel, and he was supporting us. That's how they called, like quite some time ago, that's how they called people who would just invest, like venture capitalists. They would invest in your company. And that was very exciting. So we had a company for media production. So we did all kinds of things. We had a magazine. We did photo productions. We did lots of creative concept work. And then after 8 years, I kind of knew the problems. I was bored by the same problems. I was bored by our company setup. So we had around 20, 25 employees. We didn't know how to grow, how to scale. We had no idea. So I tried to change the company, had no idea about change management or anything. And then after I tried that, I decided, no, I have to get out of this. This is just boring. I'm not developing further, because at the beginning, the learning curve was like steep, very steep. Every day, new problems. I was a workaholic, like no private life. And then after 8 years, I decided to sell my shares. I went on a big sabbatical, traveled around the world for almost 2 years. And I was on the look or the search for like, what's the next thing that really gets me, like that, where you have, because in my startup before, in my company, I was there for 9 years. I was every day full on, like full energy, like really on fire. And then the fire slowly got smaller. And that's why I think I quite naturally wanted to find something new that really would kind of go like, "Ooh, I really want to do this." And so I thought maybe I'm going to be, how do you call these people, like ocean biologists or anything like this? I was looking for something crazy, like something that hasn't been there before, that's totally new, but I didn't find anything. Like nothing would jump at me, kind of go like, yeah, you have to do this, you have to do that. And then I came back. After 2 years, I went to Hamburg. So before I was in Munich. So I went to Hamburg, and yes, was a bit lost. So I thought, yeah, I'm lost. So let's be a business coach, which is not a good idea. Because before, I mean, I have to admit, I did like 2 coaching degrees to kind of walk myself out of the company. So because I mean, you have to develop from be one of the most important people, like the center of everything, to become like not important anymore, because otherwise you can't leave a company. So I wanted to really hand this over, like in a really, like I tried to be my best to really prepare the other people, and so prepare 2 people to take over my job. And so I started in Hamburg again. I discovered service design by that time. That was, I think, 2011 or something like this. And through service design, I came completely, I mean, kind of entered this area of very complex topics. Like it's a meta discipline. It's not like that you always solve it through an app or through, I don't know, whatever, something else. It really depends on like maybe an app or on a robot or, I don't know, a trade show booth. Like media didn't really matter. It's more about so what are the user needs and what kind of concept you need to develop to create value. And that was like the thing that really attracted me. And especially there, I kind of brought together psychology all of a sudden and design or digital design. And I was always interested in psychology. That's why I had this coaching thing also always in the back of my mind. But I thought I'm just a weird person because I'm interested in technology and psychology. I thought this is like a really weird combination nobody needs. So I just didn't know, because I was so busy working with our key accounts that I didn't really have time to go like to just open up and look at the world. And that's what happened in my sabbatical. And that was the beginning about like when I concentrated completely on human behavior with technology or with services. And services, I mean, can consist of many different digital touch points that, and even physical touch points. And that was like then the area that I was really interested in. So I did lots of consulting, worked with many different rather large corporations because these were the ones who had the money to actually do something like that. There was the time when nobody knew what is a user journey. People would look at you like, huh, what's she talking about? I don't know. I even talked to somebody at BMW, and I was working with BMW for quite some time. And they said like, yeah, we will do lots of things, but for sure we will never do service design. It's just like not the thing that we do. And I was like, oh, what a pity. Yeah. And that's how I kind of got into this whole, consulting, working at the intersection of technology and human behavior, and also did a PhD to find out like how do you have to work with this whole organizational culture, organizational layer to make companies able to adapt new things, adapt innovation, be in this space of big uncertainty. So I think the technology now always changes. But the uncertainty is always the same. It's always new. It's always, I do many projects that are open. They have open questions. It's an open end. You don't know what you're working on. You're always in this space where you go, oh my God, we don't know yet. We have to find out. We have to do proper research. We have to really investigate what are the people doing at the moment. How can we improve systems that they are better usable, that people can, just that it creates any kind of value for the humans, for the companies, ideally for the society and the planet as well. Even so, this has been maybe for lots of companies, not the top priority, at least in the last year or so.
I love this. So firstly, I love the fact that BMW there's a type of journey they don't do.
Yeah.
Right. Everything else is about journeys, but here's one they don't do. But then if we look at technologies and humans, I guess put in simple terms, we used to design technology to kind of do things for humans. And now, of course, technology is influencing humans. And so this overlap between the two, kind of we all understand it now because we've all seen the impact of social media. We've seen the impact of AI. We know what technology is doing to jobs. We know what it's doing to our lives. At least we have a sense it's doing something. So now what you do, it's really kind of obvious, but I love the fact that you just got there by exploring and playing with this space and recognizing that this is your intersection in your personal Venn diagram of humans and machines. So I love that you got there on your own rather than looking and saying what would be useful. It's kind of like, this is what interests me. And that really comes across in the way that you talk about it, but also what you put out online is that you're really passionate about this.
Yeah, that's important to be passionate, I think, to have a certain drive. Otherwise, it's all boring.
And I guess curiosity strikes me as the other really key thing is you talked about questions that don't necessarily have easy answers or may not have answers at all. That's a key part of what you're doing, right? Is this asking questions and just see where that takes us. And there isn't necessarily a clear path. It's just, you just want to see what happens, I guess.
Yes, I think that's absolutely how you say. Like, I think curiosity has been always a very important topic, or like just like a state of mind to be curious, to learn. I'm highly motivated by learning and having like insights. If you connect the dots and you go like, oh, now I have an insight. I love this. That is like exactly also something I don't want to be like, I don't want that AI takes away from me. Really having this reading different things and then have your own conclusion, because these are the conclusions that stick with you. If I do this very quickly with any kind of AI tool, it doesn't stay with me. It just disappears very quickly. And I think I really like to, because I'm surrounded in Germany or in Munich, especially by lots of large corporations, or even I would say very engineering driven companies. They have very product centric cultures. They're very risk averse. They don't like risk. They like to have everything safe. And I really love the space that is open. And I like to inspire people or leaders and others to enter this field. Because I think if you really want to survive, you always have to find your own solutions and not just run after the things that everybody is doing. And I think that's one part of my motivation, is to motivate others, to inspire others, to say like, look, kind of follow a very strict process. So if I do, let's say, if I work with leaders or with teams, I'm always very over prepared. I have like a really strict process with lots of freedom. It sounds like very like this is not can't go together, but it's always open end. But I really like to have the details kind of laid out. So it's not that I just make this, oh, let's see what we do, be very fuzzy and there will be something, yeah, there's something cool coming out. No, it's really about, and that's maybe a part of this engineering mindset as well. Because my first study was like, I have an engineering diploma. So I think maybe some of this kind of stick with me to always have a really strict and a really good process, but still, and look at, or maybe consider strong principles. So through my PhD, I got a lot into systems thinking because that was my theoretical basis. I didn't even know how much you can find in this theory that it's so valuable. And it explains, I don't know, almost everything that I do or that I experience with other people, especially working with, for example, executive teams. So if you look through these systemic glasses, you have so many answers why things don't work. Or if you always try to do it the same way, it doesn't work. And then look at it like more like, what are the consequences? How is this all connected? And where can we find the real cause and not just try to remove the system, just put something over the blinking lamp. No, just try to figure out what's really wrong. And I think that's the research aspect or the curiosity to really dive into projects or situations and try to uncover like why is this not working and how do we have to do this in a more, I don't know, just in a more clever maybe way. And I think there like the systemic thinking really helps a lot to embrace or not be afraid of the complexity and try to digest it. And I think with service design, there's so many methods and tools that help to make complexity, to break it down, to work with it, to make it actionable. And that's something that I try to, so that's, I think, infusing my work a lot. So trying to help others to be more brave or be less afraid, which not always works. So
I love this because if we think about engineering, we could see that as a very sort of rigid discipline, structures and yet a lot of what you do is very creative and very open-ended. And so I was trying to sort of square that. And it seemed to me that actually what you kind of put a structure in place to allow creativity. Because if you just have a blank sheet, if there's no structure, anything could happen. And that's exciting for some people. But actually, if you want to solve problems, you need some form of constraints to allow creativity to flourish. And it seems to me that in a lot of what you're doing, there is some constructs there, and there's methodologies there, but it's very much around creative thinking within that.
Yes, I think that what I'm always looking for a process. I always like to experiment as well with the process to have some repeatable steps that you can take again and again. Because if you just sit there and have this creative idea, that's not very, I would say, not very easy for teams to repeat that. So I think to really have a structure.
I was just thinking about like an apprenticeship where the person teaching just says, just come up with an amazing idea where you don't teach anybody anything. So I love that idea of, I guess it's a way of replicating, right?
Yes.
And so we learn lessons from things, and then we can build a method that works, and then we can build again. Because I love that idea because it's great for a piece of art that's a one-off piece of art that's unique. But a lot of the things you're talking about, it's about solving bigger challenges. And so we need to have that replicability.
And also, I think we need to have in place what are actually the things that we can change? What are the things that we can redesign, for example? And where are the roadblocks? So it doesn't really help if we redesign something that is completely not the roadblock. And I think this is also very important to always, try to understand the system, the whole thing. Like where's like a leverage? Where's something that we can shift or that we can turn around? And that's why also now talking about, for example, human agent or human AI collaboration that I'm investigating a lot since I've entered this institute 3.5 years ago. Yes, it's always also about finding a process that works, finding what you have to do. So sometimes it's not just this one thing, but you have to always think, for example, the technology or this one use case, but at the same time, you have to have a parallel stream where you already think about, but how do we as a company change now how it used to be, and how do we prepare the people? How do we enable people? How do we deliver the right KPIs? So you always have to have a multi-stream approach. So it's not just this one thing. I think we always need to embed it. And there, I think it helps a lot if we try to visualize that this is just not the one thing that we do. It's just always a network, or just like something that's connected, like different things you have to do together, because the things are getting so much more complex since they maybe were when we talked only about a digital service. That I think if you look at many digital services, they're still really bad. And you would say, oh, that was easy compared to a technology like Gen AI. And I think this is just amazing that even this is not tackled yet. I mean, not really. I mean, in some cases, I mean, they're really good, or like well thought through. But then other services just are completely too much, too less.
And it is interesting because we've all had terrible digital experiences. Apps that just stuff that doesn't work, stuff that is not user friendly, stuff that it just almost makes things more complicated. And even people that are used to using technology can struggle with it, let alone older generations who might not be as familiar. And so I agree with you entirely. What you might term the traditional digital solutions are not always great. We haven't mastered that. And then this thing called AI, I say comes along. It's been there for a while, but sort of comes out with ChatGPT in particular into the consciousness. And so I'm really intrigued and I want to sort of explore your work there, because that's obviously a key focal point for you, is looking at that technology. What's your sort of discovery point with AI? Had you been working with it for a long time, or was ChatGPT your sort of awakening in that space?
I mean, it was kind of my awakening in terms of UX and how easy you can make a tool accessible. So I think that was like the eye opener, how important it is to design how you interact with any kind of system. And I think that was so easy, this line of text, and you can do it. And that's why I think this was like for a lot of people, the big breakthrough, to say now it's so easy. Everybody can use it. My grandma can use it. My 6-year-old child could use it, if you think that is a smart way. And I think this really shows us that how you design the interface towards the humans is like this. I mean, it's absolutely crucial. If you can't use it, it's impossible. And I think this is like now, I would say like that this niche, it used to be a niche thing. I mean, the students that study at our institute, they've been using ChatGPT for quite some time, even before it was so easy accessible. You could see that because some of the things that came out were really strange. You could like, how on earth are you having this kind of strange ideas? And why are your ideas always bullet points? This is bizarre. Yes. And I think that's like when I started with this institute, that's when I got into this field, because I'm surrounded by many very knowledgeable computer scientists that know a lot about these technologies. But then I think for me, the big goosebump moment was when I saw the first human agent teams running, when I saw the first multi-agent kind of system really working. Like I saw how that's so nice about tools like N8N or Make or whatever, that you can actually see how your task gets processed. It's like, oh, it's now there, and then there, and then there, and now it goes, the next agent is coming. And I think that was like the moment where I thought, oh my God, now it really has an effect. It's gonna have a huge effect, in my opinion, on every team that's using it. So it's a totally new, we have new players out there now. And I think this is like that was the moment when I thought, oh my God, this is like now really much, much more immersive than it used to be before. Because now you can, it's a lot about trust. It's about building this relationship with this technology. An agent is invisible. You see this, you can look at your, let's say, at this interface, and you see how it's working, for example, how N8N is processing this task, and where it maybe also gets stuck, and where you have had if you maybe have the wrong API or something changed, it's broken. So it breaks a lot of time, the execution. But if you don't look at this, and I think if I imagine, maybe, I don't know how much time it will take until we reach that point where a standard, let's say, sales team has a whole set of agents supporting their like their ordinary work. So they probably won't look at that. So pretty sure they will not look at, this is more like backstage, how this whole thing is working. But they need to have, so this is like the invisible part, and we have to make it somehow visible. So we have to create new interfaces that humans can work or are willing to work with these systems. And yeah, and I think that's a big new field that we have to take into account. Because it's not the robot. I mean, there will be some robots and there are more robots. I mean, we have robots like for cleaning the floor and so on, or in, let's say, in hospitals or in caregiving situations. But usually I think at the workplace, it's not the robot that we always thought that would sit next to us and do something. So it is going to be a different element. And that's why I think how to design these systems will make, I think they are like the tipping point. Like if this is a really bad design, we can't use it. And it's just like a really waste of time. If they're designed very well and very, I would say, kind of taking into account what humans need to trust the technology, what humans need to think that this is a reliable system, I think then it's like the iPhone. I mean, people tell you, oh, I'm not so much into technology, but they have their iPhone or their smartphone in their hand the whole day, 8 hours, 10 hours. And they're like, no, I'm not so much into technology. But what's in your hand? And so for us, it's like, I think I did one research project, and there was this mother of six children. And she said, like, my smartphone is the extension of myself. And this is a quote that really stuck with me. And I was like, yes, that's how we can use technology. It's really augmenting our life. And I think this is a very interesting new field. How do you design this dynamic process of humans trying to work with AI?
You've touched on so many dynamics. If I think about trust, right? Can we trust these things to do what they've been what are they doing? Do we trust that they're doing the right thing? Can we rely on them? There's an interesting thing there about transparency, where if you ask an employee to do something, unless you're micromanaging them, you don't know what's going on inside their brain necessarily. So we've got more transparency in some respects because we can see what these things are doing. On the other hand, less transparency because we don't necessarily know how it's come to that conclusion. We've got, what does work involve? What does management involve? What are humans going to be doing? How do the humans interface with the machines? So all of these things are super interesting because we almost have to go back to basics on lots of workplace dynamics. And I'm struck by your comment earlier that we haven't mastered the early digital stuff, that we still don't get right. And yet, I don't think we've mastered work either. There are lots of people, traditional management isn't necessarily done well. And so what you're pointing towards here is this is a fundamentally challenging, I guess, just sort of how do we adjust to this thing where we're not necessarily good at it in the first place? And now we're being asked to manage things that have completely different dynamics, that are hugely scalable, that are going to change everything. So this is, I guess, one of your things that we have to look at this. We have to understand it. But this is really hard, right? This is going to be very and then we look at this thing that's clever, ultimately could be cleverer than we are. So it's not even like we can fully understand everything. So I think this is why I sense is why you're excited about it, because we have to solve this problem. It touches everything, but it's really hard.
Absolutely. I mean, it really touches our fundamentals, our basic needs as humans. And I think that's exactly where human behavior, and that's, I think that's such a interesting topic. It's not the technology alone. I mean, technology is important. It's a lot about data. It's a lot about being able to gain competence and being able to work with these tools. And then it's a lot about this really human aspect of trust and the culture. Like, how do we celebrate that AI has made a mistake? Oh my God, it didn't do something right. People get really, they cheer, kind of, they love it. And then you go like, yeah, I mean, but you as the user, as the team member, I mean, you have to train this system. And if it doesn't do something correct, yes, that's part of it. I mean, that's part of the thing. But if you are not trained and working with these kind of systems, I mean, how do you know? And there was such a nice quote from a researcher from Sweden. And he said, like, we have to move from trust in facts to trust in acts.
Love that.
It really changes the whole, because an AI is based on probability. I mean, it's not, and the interesting thing is that it's like humans. I mean, I can tell you something, and maybe this is complete bullshit. It's not right. I mean, it's just my perception. It's how I kind of read maybe systems theory or this or that. I can explain it to you, but it also depends on how you prompt me. I mean, what is your question? And maybe I don't really get your question, so I answer something completely different. I go a different path, and maybe you say like, "Oh, this is interesting," or you would go like, "Oh, this is bizarre. I don't know what she's talking about." And I think this is so much about conversation. And I mean, at the moment we have conversations. I mean, it's a conversation machine. It's a large language model. I think that's just something we're not used to. Before we were used to very static answers and digital services, and now it changes. And I think it changed in such a amazing speed that it's very hard to get everybody, or at least, I mean, you will never get everybody on board or everybody excited, because I mean, there is a big ethical aspect, absolutely. But to just make sure that that the people say like, "Oh, I really see that there's also a chance and it's not only a threat." I think that's a really huge topic. And I always like to think about that. A lot of cases we have like format problems. So you look at this very chaotic, how humans work, how humans think. We have a very fluid thinking. We think about this, and then we go there and we go there, and maybe also, I mean, I never know exactly where I find things on my computer. I'm still quite lost. I know there's so many things on there, so many studies, but it's very hard. I don't have a really good structure. And then I have things that I write down, and then I have things on this drive and there, and it is cloud. And so I think human work is very chaotic unless you work in a very regulated place where you have really standard procedures to follow. But I would say I'm also a knowledge worker, so my work is chaotic. And now there comes this linear, very AI it's completely different format. It's completely different logic. And I think so. The problem is not the AI. It's like it's a mismatch. So with humans, absolutely.
I love that way of looking at it because I recognize the chaos in the way I work and the way I think. And I try to pretend it's always a good thing. And sometimes it is amazing, but sometimes it's not so good particularly when I'm dealing with, and actually I think there's an interesting, when you're dealing with, I don't know, the tax authorities or you're in court, there's an expectation that we are logical and sensible. And yet we know that so we have to create these stories to justify why we've done things. And I think it's really interesting when we think about how does the technology work and how do we ask it the questions and how do we think about how to use it when actually many of the things that we do, we're not all homo economicus. And so I love this idea of thinking about how do we do that? And I guess your work is looking at that gap between the way the machines behave, the way humans behave, and how do we kind of manage that? And the more I talk to you, the more I think we're not ready. If I look at the front end of ChatGPT, it is pretending to be human. And so there's a little bit of theater there, right? It's just sort of faking it.
Yes.
And behind is not very human. So there's an interesting thing here about we're being potentially misled. And so how do we react to that? And I think the reactions to generative AI, you've got people there's fundamentalism, right? People that love it. It's the most amazing thing. And then there's people, this is terrible. This is the worst thing ever. As you talk about some of these dynamics, I'm not surprised people come up with simple narratives about it because we're not, to your point, we're not necessarily equipped to understand it. And so we try and find a way to understand it based on how we see the world.
Absolutely. And I think maybe before, I think with computers, I mean, with every new technology, I think people were always afraid that it would take lots of their freedom or autonomy. And obviously autonomy is it's one of number one, the top priorities of our needs, that we have a certain aspect of autonomy, but also about like, we want to be masters, we want to be competent. And I think that's also something where AI really, we're not sure anymore. If you say something in a meeting and somebody looks it up and says like, "Oh, you're wrong." So I think there are many, many different aspects to it, but also this huge aspect when, I mean, we've been or I've been doing lots of talks in the last weeks, especially since we started a bigger pilot project at the university where we really investigate these human agent teams. So we build them together with companies, and then we test certain, what about ethics? Did you think about the ethics? And I think that's also like another, I would say, I mean, it is a very, how do you call it, like ambivalent.
Mhm.
So you can look at it from many different aspects, but it always comes up. And I think this also, I mean, there's lots of fear, there's lots of persistence. And I think that's all very human and also important, that we just don't give all of our data to these LLMs, but obviously people do it. I mean, they talk about their most private things they never talked about. I mean, they use it as a therapist. So, and I think that was like I don't know if this was surprising. Maybe it wasn't for some AI researchers. Maybe they completely expected that because it behaves like a human, as you said. We feel like, oh, this is a human. I mean, sometimes luckily we know, oh my God, it's just repeating the same things, and it's just like always, it's always like the same. Yes, so I think there's a huge aspect of not knowing if all the jobs will disappear and so on. And that's why this always comes up again. And I think it's also a mirror of humanity. I mean, we can always use things in a good and the bad way. We can be a hero or a Nero very quickly. And I think this is something that everybody is, and I think it always comes down to our own decisions. We have a certain moral and we have our values, and then we think about it. So we have these ethical discussions or thoughts, and then we have our behavior. And a lot of times it's not aligned. You're very human to say like, yeah, I know I shouldn't order through Amazon. I should go to the local shop here. Oh, but I don't have time and I have to this and this and this. And all of a sudden it happened again. And I think that's like I mean, depending on your values, a lot of times we don't act in line. And that's why I think everybody's so afraid, because if you think about yourself and you know that sometimes, oh, I'm very proud because I have my values and I have my moral, and that's exactly how I did it. I was really brave. I was consistent. But humans are not always consistent, and we just don't always have a very rational. We are never rational, but at least we think we are rational. And I think that's why maybe people that's why I can completely understand that lots of people are very afraid. They have a lot of respect because you can use AI in the worst way we can think about. And I mean, there are companies out there who say like, we will never have employees again. We only work with AI agents. And that's why I think this is with every new technology, but it has never been as threatening as with this kind of technology.
It's super interesting when you talk about ethics, because whichever side you listen to, people inevitably use ethics on some level. So if I go to the sort of Elon Musk end, it will be, we need to experiment with this stuff. It's very powerful. And yeah, there'll be a few things that go wrong, but this is important. This is progress. So the ethics is progress, saving humanity, all that sort of argument. You get the opposite end of the spectrum, which is, well, we can't have it getting rid of a single job. And look, it could make terrible decisions. And therefore, from an ethical perspective, we shouldn't be using this at all. And it seems to me the truth is somewhere between the two, but the ethical arguments do kick in very, very quickly to justify. We bend our ethics to match what we want to be able to do with this technology. So I think in some respect, this is just it's almost a good illustration of the challenges of being human. It is a magnifying glass on
Absolutely
some of the things that we potentially don't always have to think about or don't have to talk about or aren't exposed to. It's forcing us to have these sorts of discussions. And so I think in some respects, it's a different technology. In other respects, I love this idea of it. Shannon Valor talks about it being a mirror. And I think one of the things that it's kind of forcing us to face up to is exactly these dynamics, that we are hypocritical, that we are sometimes stupid. And so I love a technology that can do amazing things, can do terrible things, kind of is just a reflection of humanity.
Absolutely. And also, I think it's quite human that we always hope that the other person will behave quite ethical or even maybe more ethical than we would. And that's why I think it's always the thing. If I give a talk, I'm exposed, and then people want to ask me, and I go like, and then I try to give it back, as you said, as a mirror, give it back. And they're like, yeah, but this is like, we are humans. We are always in between comfort and safety and maybe ethical decisions that could be maybe that are more uncomfortable, that are more expensive and so on. And that's why I think this is something that comes down to every company. I mean, the HR leader or the CEO, what will they all of a sudden only employ, or will they have jobs for the juniors or not? And I had this discussion last weekend with a friend saying, look, because we get these questions. And last week we had an event where some students showed some of their AI agent systems that they built. And then they got people asked the same questions. So did you think about the ethical implications and so on? And then I thought like, is this actually ethical that we kind of do these things with our students? Because these are the ones, they will enter the workplace maybe in 2 years. And maybe they will be the ones where there are no junior positions left, or maybe not. So is it ethical that they experiment with these systems? Or would it be unethical not to give them the skills? Because now they have the skills. It's very interesting. I saw a job advert there's a new company or like one of these new scale-ups from India, and they were looking for how they called an AI engineer. And I looked at the job description. I thought like, oh, my students in the 3rd semester, they could apply for it already because they have been heavily investigating and designing multi-agent system. It's like, oh, they could actually, I mean, because now people can't say you need 10 years of experience with AI. No. But, if you have, let's say, 1 year, 1.5 year, like robust experience, you can apply for a job like that. So all of a sudden, maybe they can apply for a job that is like a senior position, but a senior also has to learn these things new. And that's why I think it's so controversial, because you can always look at it from both sides. And that's why we thought, or I think it's very good that we do these things with our students so they are prepared. They can use these systems, they can design and build these systems. And that's all we can do. But I think it would be very strange if we would say, no, we don't work with this. Because if you think about all the chances that there are in medicine and research and medical research to accelerate, kind of fighting against certain diseases, I think it would be very unethical not to do it. But then obviously, sure, you have other parts where it's like, would be so nice if we could just use it for the good things. But
I guess you could make the same argument about driving. You could teach somebody to drive a car and they could drive an ambulance, or they could use the car to commit crime. Right. So you're in the same sort of issue, which is you're giving them a tool. And I guess you then have to think about teaching them some ethics, but that's hard as well. I guess you just have to be realistic about the dynamics.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. And sure, obviously, yes, there will be jobs, they will disappear. There will be jobs that maybe accountants that do like the whole day, maybe they do repetitive tasks. Yes, obviously, yes, these jobs will disappear. We don't know what other jobs will arise, but I think we never knew this. There were many, many innovations where something disappeared, another thing developed again, some new things. So I'm sure there will be new jobs out there that we don't even know about. Absolutely. I mean, if you think about 10 years back, I mean, I just think the speed is like a problem for lots of people to catch up. If you don't have the luxury to do this on a professional level, to always think and investigate and be kind of in this field, how do you want to keep up? And I think that's quite difficult. That's quite frustrating. And I think to be more resilient, or just I think there is to be resilient or to learn to be resilient is like such an important thing that our children need. I mean, I also have a 12-year-old daughter, so I also have a person in my family that wants to work something one day, and we don't know what let's say in 10, 12 years, I don't know what's going to be there.
It's kind of interesting when we think about advice. So looking at your children, looking to your students, looking to your people, just asking you, what should they do?
Mhm.
I think there's two things that fascinate me. One is, if I look at your career, you were not somebody that planned. You might have had a plan, but that plan went away and you just found your own path. So in some respects, you could say you're biased towards not having a plan and almost being well equipped to deal with it.
Mm.
But you sort of look at it and say, well, how can we help people? Because any advice you give could be amazing, or it could be really negligent, right? So it's a challenging thing of saying, actually, are those of us that are older do we have any great wisdom to impart? Because the career paths that were available to us may not be available in the future. There'll be other ones, we hope.
Mm.
So I think there's an interesting question there about what does human experience, what does that count for? And in the old days, obviously, people that were older had survived, and therefore they had some useful things. And there are still basic things we can teach, but I think you make a really interesting point, which is how do we advise younger generations?
I'm sure we have, especially if you are at universities or at school, for sure we have some advice what not to do. So I think it's a really stupid idea to completely rely on AI tools. I think if you use it for everything that you can, I think you don't have to be very smart to figure out that this is for your brain. I mean, we don't have the studies yet. We never had studies. It took quite some time before we had studies that to consume social media for 8 hours a day is not a very healthy thing. We didn't have the studies, had the numbers, but if you have common sense that this is not a very sustainable idea. And I think it's the same with, we have students that are AI natives, I would say, because they have been in school the last 3 years. They did, I guess, every homework, everything with AI, if parents allowed them to do it. But if you are 17 or 18, I guess lots of parents don't have the influence anymore to not allow you to do that. So they have hardly written anything maybe by themselves anymore. They don't do research by themselves. They don't maybe read a book anymore. And I think especially like this thing that I loved is like to read things and then all of a sudden you have this epiphany. You go like, oh my God. And now these things go together. Or last week I went for a run and we were evaluating this pilot project and all of a sudden I had this, oh yes, you can break it down to 3 things. And I was running and think, yeah, 3 things. You can break everything down to these 3 points. And that was such a satisfying, or like, it's a great feeling if you feel, oh, I have organized my thoughts and there's a new, for me, like a learning that kind of emerged and this learning stays with me. And I think if you give away this function of your brain to come up to new conclusions, I think that's pretty poor. If you only have, and especially I read somewhere that I think some neurobiologist said, like he stated, if you only use AI generated text, for example, you read them through, they are only in your short-term memory. And to transport them to your long-term memory, that's not enough. So you read all these things and they don't stay with you. And how can you then connect the dots? And I think innovation, for example, or everything that maybe is where a human species develops, I think it probably has to do with that you connect certain knowledge, you connect certain insights to something new. So it's not just the combination, like the classic intelligence, like that AI uses heavy, like you just combined everything that's already there. But you can only combine what's already known. You cannot combine something unknown. And so I think that's like for students, I feel quite sad if I see that if they write a concept, it's all bullet points. It's all AI generated. They didn't even think about it. They didn't give it a penny thought. So nothing. And I think this is just really boring because then, there was one shocking answer from a student. So they asked themselves within their peer group. So what kind of presentation did you hold about what topic? There were 2 students they didn't remember. They did a presentation in front of class. These are like the situations usually that you can remember. If you stand there in front of 30 people, for some people it's quite stressful to be so exposed. And then you have your topic that you talk about. You present a short impulse. 2 students didn't remember. And I was like, oh my God, I think I can remember almost every presentation that I ever did. Because these are these moments that are where you're full of attention, you're full of adrenaline. You stand there and you go like, oh my God, I don't want to make a mistake. And oh my God, will I really know, do I bring the point home or not? And this is shocking. And I think this is like really shocking, but maybe everybody has to get to the point where you eat too many French fries, too many chips, too much sweets, and you go like, oh my God, I'm sick of it. I think this is not a good idea. So maybe we will have to make AI diets. So like we have smartphone detox, we have to have AI detox, and start again to use a pen and paper and write something down. And
Wow. I'm shocked by that, not remembering, because you're right. If you want to engage your audience, you're in the moment. And I always have this thing where I always think if I'm not slightly nervous, something is wrong.
yes, absolutely.
Because then I'm not in the because it's a weird thing to be talking to lots of people. It's not a natural thing to do. And so if you can't remember doing it, you probably weren't in the room, I
Yes.
guess. You physically you were, but
Yeah.
sort of mentally in the room. So wow, that's fascinating. One of the things I want to make sure we did cover, Tina, one of the reasons I love your content on social media is, and I think your run may explain this, is that you're really good at pulling threads together and either coming up with amazing little quotes or finding them and sharing them. So I just want to pull a few of those to give people a sense of kind of how your brain works. And the one that I love that you posted, which I have used in presentations, fully crediting you, is where you just said, let AI handle the data while you handle the room. And I love that because there's so much behind that. And I think that's kind of relevant to the example you gave about people not remembering. Just talk us a little bit about that quote and just, I mean, how do you come up with these things and explore that one a little bit? Because for me, it was just very few words, but it was so powerful.
Oh, that's so kind that you remember these thoughts or these kind of quotes or just I mean usually these are just thoughts that arise. So my job is to observe teams, observe situations in companies. And I mean, this let AI, you can handle the room. I mean, this is all about this whole topic that when this whole new wave of technology comes in, usually it's all about the tech and everybody's just talking about tech and you have to use this tool and this tool and people get crazy. I mean, they collect tools like watches or like jewelry. And so they're completely in this very narrow minded and I have to use Claude. Oh my God, I didn't use Claude and now Claude is better. And oh no, Gemini is better. Oh my God, I have to get more into Gemini and OpenAI is out and oh God. So every day you get very stressed. And that was like maybe this just observation or this insight that, yes, you cannot, I mean, it's not a technology only discussion. Technology is important, data is important. And I think it's also very short-sighted if you say it's just a mindset problem. No, it's not just a mindset problem. It is also a mindset problem. But if you don't have the right data and the competence and you don't know, what's relevant for maybe your clients and the users, it doesn't really help if you have the great mindset. So, but the mindset topic to have this emotional and social intelligence to really still have heavy emphasis on if you do whatever you do with other people, it's so much about emotional intelligence, social intelligence, about the social skills. And maybe I think the reason why I also came up with this quote, I mean, we develop a new master program and we heavily think about what skills do our students need for the future to be future proof, at least as far as we can see it. And every interview I had, so I interviewed many, I would say, executive C-level, quite senior people, because our students, they have two professions. So they are ideally already prepared to have a leadership role. That's why I interviewed many leaders and they all kind of this thing, you need to have these social skills. If you can't talk to people, if you can't communicate, everything else, I mean, being in a leadership, being in a management, being in a situation where you are a bridge between maybe technology and whatever. That's why I think this was like this phase where I had these interviews where people really liked the like chief information officers, where you would say, oh, they're all about technology, really social skills, empathy, resilience, being able to communicate. This was like being able to listen, connect on a human level with each other. And I think that was like, just tremendous, like how much there was in the room. It was not about, oh, they need to have this skill and this tool set and so on, and this technology or this programming language, because they will change until they are ready within 3 years. It changed. So the frameworks changed. And that's why why I always come up a lot with these social, I call them social skills. In Germany, they're called soft skills, which is, I think, very bad word because it sounds like they're not important. Soft is not important. And if you work within a corporate company, you know that culture is not soft. You know that it's hard as concrete. The hidden laws or the implicit how you behave, how you have to behave. And And that's, for example, backstory of this quote.
I love that. The other one that really stuck with me recently was when you move too early, it doesn't matter that you were right. I loved it because it was, yes, it was relates to what you do, but it's also kind of like it works in relationships as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I think is really fascinating about you is you get insights from your human tech interface piece, but actually back to the mirror, it's relevant to the rest of our world. And so I see you as a sort of anthropologist helping to expose some of these dynamics that we should think about. And so that quote I loved because I thought it's interesting because you do need to have other people with you. You can have a brilliant
Mm,
idea, but if no one else wants to go with you, and that
mm,
applies to politics, it can apply to it's almost like which restaurant you go to as a couple, right? Or just there's like loads of situations. And so I love that insight that clearly came from you. I'm assuming you were thinking technological developments and those sorts of moves, but actually it's a broader human piece. So
mm.
that was another one that just really, really struck me.
I mean, I think I have a big fable for philosophy. So if you look at my website, there is like where I have like more like longer articles. It's a lot about philosophy. So I like to go back to, I would say, ancient wisdom, to old philosophers, people like Aristotle or Confucius and so on. And because I mean, they were so wise. So actually, there's no need to reinvent the wheel new. So if you look at these really are like the Stoics, I'm a big fan of the Stoics, the Stoic philosophers. It's amazing what they wrote so many years ago, like hundreds of years ago. And I think there is so much. I mean, I think there was one article I wrote like, what if Aristotle would be your CO. And I think this sometimes brings like, I love this because it comes from a completely different angle and you can shift your perspective if you bring in this timeless wisdom. And these are the things I like to circle around. So I like to read books about philosophy and so on, and then bring it together. And then I have like maybe the Harvard Business Review, and then I have a philosophy book, and then and then also maybe some new AI report, and then I read all these three things, and then I go for a run, and then the thoughts connect.
But that's super interesting because as I was looking back to what's the human advantage, if you kind of, I mean, Harvard Business Review is great, right? But if you just read Harvard, everybody else is just reading Harvard Business Review. There are probably, I don't want to say
Absolutely, yeah.
millions, but probably, I don't know, but there's hundreds of thousands of people that read Harvard Business Review. So if that's your sole source,
Mm,
then you're not going to be original. And if you just read Harvard Business Review and another academic, so I love the fact that you're bringing these alternative sources in because it sort of strikes me that as we look at solving some of the challenges, we need people that are multidisciplinary, that are looking for influences in other spaces. And that's the bit I think is interesting is you're bringing, if I looked at your kind of official title, you'd be thinking it's very technology focused. But actually what you're doing is pulling from these other human sources and kind of create it. It's your own combination that sure, like give enough AI models, it could come up with something, but you're producing a it's a very Tina led view of the world. It's your lens.
yeah.
I find that really interesting and engaging. And back to why I love discovering you on LinkedIn, because there's loads of people who'll just tell you what the Harvard Business Review says.
Mm,
Right, great. I can read that myself. I don't really need a Harvard Business Review curation service.
yeah.
But what I do love is when people bring different threads and you can kind of go, well, that's interesting. Because I think the solution, it seems to me, a solution to lots of the problems that we have, back to your point about the Stoics and go, they may already exist. We just need to tap into them. And we need to have
Absolutely.
different sources if we want to solve these problems.
Absolutely. I mean, there is so much. I've been working lots with leaders. I mean, which is quite also I would say, a natural evolution. If you want to change something within an organization, if you can't bring leadership, C-level, the top management, you can't convince them, nothing will happen. So it was I think, a natural evolution. You start with product teams, and then you make your way up because you feel like, oh my God, if they are not convinced, nothing will change. So if we really want to have a change and a transformation, we have to work with a different flight level. And working with leaders, I've discovered that for them, it was always really helpful if you bring in this really old wisdom, because that's so, I mean, usually it's written also in such a clear and easy way that it's extremely easy to understand. It has no business jargon. It has not all these fluffy words. Usually it's especially the Greek and philosophers and also others. It's really the basic things, and that's all there is. And if you read this, you go like, yes, I mean, everything is written in here. And then maybe you have some really cool new studies from Harvard or from another university, and you go like, wow. And now you bring these two things together. But the human, like the humans themselves, the behavior didn't change. I mean, even so, the world spins around us, but the basic needs are still the same. We need autonomy. We want to feel knowledgeable. We need to connect to people to feel valuable, for example. So, and these are the basic things. And yes, and so I think there's no need to, I mean, it's fun to develop new leadership models. I like that too. We have to go through this, but actually it's not needed because everything is already there. And even so, now we have AI, still the basics, how you connect, for example, with each other. And now especially about ethics, if we go back to ethics, just read the old things and everything is there. I mean, you can just replace the context, but the content is there. So no need to invent everything.
But I love that from a behavioral angle because, firstly, the advice has been around for a long time, right? So it's survived because it's good advice. I mean, there's some terrible advice that survived, but generally speaking, it's good. And so, firstly, that's good. That it's survived through the ages, so it's been passed down. But the second thing I love is you're not framing it as you're coming in with the solutions, right? You're positioning it as someone else's, and you're saying this might be useful. And so I think when we're looking to get humans to change their perspective on things, because logically, there's no point in you going in and telling them everything they're doing is fine, right? You're generally not brought in to keep things going as they are, right? We want to change, refresh, solve problems. And so I love the fact that there's a nice bit of humility here, which is this is not my stuff, right? This has just come from, I'm just connecting stuff and kind
Yes,
of
I'm
putting it
just
in front
connecting.
of
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
And then they're not arguing with you. It's
Yeah.
kind of like you're arguing with ancient ideas. And so I think that's much more, because particularly nowadays, lots of arguments are like, I am right, you are wrong.
Mm.
And I think there's something quite nice about removing that, because it's not about you. It's about, here's some things I've discovered and see what you think of this.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's always the thing about if you go into this discussion about good and bad, this is good or bad, wrong or right, I think you're already lost. It's more about, is this a functional behavior or is this dysfunctional behavior? And sometimes you can have, even if you, for example, have been a brilliant leader at one company, it doesn't mean that your leadership style works let's say in a different context, different culture. So I think it's always about understanding the context and then adapting to the situation and being able to read the room, have your common sense, and then know how to behave. Yeah.
Amazing. Final question, because I'm conscious of time. What's next for you? Does this just keep evolving? Is that a bad question? Because as you've told us before, you don't have a necessary plan. My sense is you've got loads more to discover. There's lots more to do. But have you got any things that are exciting you now outside what we've talked about?
No, I think at the moment I just continue what I've been doing because, as you said, there is so much still to discover. I think we're just at the beginning of figure out like how do we really integrate, how do we have humans, and how do we match human behavior and at the moment AI. But I guess in my lifetime, I don't know what other technologies will be there. It will be just come faster probably. And so yeah, it's just continuing and always looking at the next step and going like, so what's the next thing that's a logic consequence? So I think that's always, I mean, we look at how do humans work with AI, but then you also at the same time have to look at how do organizations have to change, because it's not the old org chart anymore, I guess. I mean, even so now you have the agents in between maybe, but it doesn't really make sense because things won't be as linear anymore. So we will have probably a completely new design of organizations. So this will be massive, probably, because it's going to be more liquid. Different things will be connected. Maybe we don't have departments anymore because why? Maybe you have similar different processes. So maybe you will have a completely redesign of everything and so on. I mean, there's so much now happening. I think we're just at the beginning of this new level of working differently. I mean, I just read an article today or like a post that there's such a big difference between, let's say in San Francisco, people are already completely connected. They have maybe already 30 agents running, every person doing everything, evaluating every decision. And then you have people and organizations, they still are waiting to get access to Claude or Gemini. to just type an email. So we have this just massive, I would say, we have this bubble and people already like prepared, packed with invisible agents around them, observing, evaluating everything. And on the other side, yeah, people just starting. Even heard a conversation, I think last week. Wow, now I finally tried ChatGPT. Like it was like at lunch at the next table, and I was like, oh my God. And actually, by chance, I knew this person. He's a professor. And I was like, oh my God. Yes, but this is reality. If you don't maybe have to use it, why should you use it? You just wait. You just wait, or just, especially if
That's interesting, right? Because there's early adopter logic that is, if we look at any new technology, it's going to be expensive to start with. So if I look at physical technology, let's let someone else pay for that first, right? They can pay for the expensive prototype because it's going to be slightly crap, right? And then I'll come in when it's a bit cheaper, right? So there is a logic to that. But then you kind of go, that doesn't work for digital products because actually you're behind the curve. And I think that's fascinating. And I can see why the academic temptation is, I don't need to do that. I haven't got to it's just all the same arguments that people have used. So there's a certain sort of academic logic to it, and I can understand that. But wow, that's absolutely fascinating. Love this. And the other thing I love about what you just said is you are pointing towards potentially the demise of one of the things I think is really pernicious, which is the org chart. Because I understand the logic behind org charts, but they're often excuses for all sorts of terrible human behavior. So if digital tech can help us destroy those, I'm up for that particular job.
Absolutely. I mean, it's good and bad at the same time again. I mean, but also, we have the org chart, and then that's the formal view. And then we have the informal org chart, I would say, which is much more interesting. Like who actually has the power? Who is like big influencing which decision? And I think now it's, if we have like completely like frontier firms, how they are called, like with many agents running, I don't know, maybe this is completely non-functional. Maybe we realize, oh my God, this does not work at all. But I think this is like now, I would say the new task to figure out like which is, does this work or not? And how do we have to do it that it works? And how do we make sure that, that the worst things are inhibited? How do you say like that the systems don't behave in a really bad way? So, and also the people trying to use it have certain corridors that are safe. So I think to create these safe environments where we can test it in a really safe way. That's also, But as you said, I mean, there's so much to do. That's why I don't know. I think that's the thing. I don't know what I'm doing in a year, what I'm researching. So,
well, I'll tell you what, I look forward to finding out. But I look for you because you'll be sharing it with us. That's what I love about what you do is you put this stuff out there. It's thought-provoking. It's interesting. So I want to say, firstly, thank you so much for just being like a rarity on LinkedIn, which is some of high quality content that's always engaging, always thought-provoking. As people will have detected on the show, thank you also for being an amazing guest. I will put links to you on LinkedIn, your website, your faculty page, all of those sorts of things so people can discover you. But please keep going. I think we need people like you. I'm delighted that you're in education. So thank you, one, for what you do there, but two, for being an amazing guest on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me as a guest. That was it was really interesting. I really enjoyed our conversation and your thoughts and your thought-provoking questions. So it was my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So that's it for this episode of the Human Risk Podcast. My enormous thanks to you for listening, and of course, to Tina for appearing. To find out more about Tina Mukdai, her research, a link to her LinkedIn profile and website, have a look in the show notes. You'll find them all there. If this is your first time listening to the Human Risk Podcast, where have you been? But thank you so much for joining me. You can subscribe wherever you get your quality audio content. It's available on all of the major podcasting networks. If you like the show and have yet to leave a review or rating for it, please do so. It really, really does help. You can do that on whichever platform you download the show from. To discover episodes that you might have missed, visit the show's website, which is humanriskpodcast.com. I am sure you'll find something there that you haven't heard that might be of interest. I will be back very soon with another episode of this show, but in the meantime, stay safe, enjoy those AI detoxes, and above all, thank you so much for listening.